Welcome, everybody, to Another Bad Call, the podcast that proves the refs aren't the only ones who get it wrong. What's going on, fellas?
As of the time of us recording here, we are T-minus 70 hours away from broadcast football being played for the 2024 NFL season. So I am getting stoked. We just had probably the last big event of our summer before the kids go back to school. And so looking forward to football. I've been steadily drafting my best ball teams and haven't really started prepping for the season-long draft yet, but fantasy draft. Ready for football for sure.
Yeah, so I didn't even register with my head that it's under 72 hours.
No, it's been that kind of weekend.
And we're going. Woo.
That's right.
Oh, that put
I mean, we're not going to probably get to see our starters. I doubt it, but or maybe even backup second team players. But it'll be football and it'll be on TV.
And we got some boys going into Canton. So
that's right.
That should be exciting.
We'll probably see them interview and take viral pictures, and that's about it.
What was that video you sent me? The reel you sent me, Nat? The last 3 times that the Bears have played in the Hall of Fame game, they've won their division.
Yep.
Can they go 4 for 4?
Fingers crossed.
Can they do it? We'll see, but we'll get into that a little bit later. What do you say we go ahead and jump into things here, guys? You want to get running with it?
Let's go fast.
All right. Well, before we jump fully into what we're doing, don't forget to like, subscribe, whatever it is for whatever platform you're watching. That way, you know when we drop our latest episodes, you can stay up to date on everything we're doing. Make sure you check us out at Another Bad Call on most social media platforms and anotherbadcall.com, where occasionally we write stuff sometimes. But with that out of the way, last week we looked at the AFC. This week we're tackling the NFC. And we're going to go ahead and let Justin start us off with NFC South. What do you got for us, man?
Yeah, buddy. Well, let's see here. We got the NFC South. Divisional matchups are AFC West and NFC East this year. And so we're going to just go through these teams alphabetically. Atlanta Falcons. Big changes for the Falcons this year. They got a new coaching staff from the McVay tree. You got Raheem Morris as a head coach and Zach Robinson, offensive coordinator. The pluses for Atlanta is Kirk Cousins comes along to go with the new offensive coordinator and the already in place legit weapons that they've had. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. They added Darnell Mooney and Rondell Moore. So this is a ready-to-go offense that should be functional and give those weapons some actual opportunity to live up to their draft hype. On a negative note for the Falcons, they made the kind of head-scratching draft pick in the first round of Michael Penix. Only head-scratching in the fact that they spent the draft cap or the salary capital on Cousins, and so now they're going to be wasting that low cap hit on a rookie quarterback that's probably not going to see the field for at least 2 years. This team was 6th in total defensive efficiency last year, but they lost free agents Calais Campbell and Bud Dupree, and their preseason group ratings on the front 7 dropped to 29th overall, and the secondary dropped to 24th. Moving on, we have Carolina Panthers, still real low expectations. They've got a new head coach, Dave Canales, and offensive coordinator, Brad Idzik. And I would be lying if I told you I knew who either of these guys are. This organization is a league worst 31.3% win rate since new owner David Tepper took over in 2018. They're still going to be digging out of the Bryce Young trade that they made with the Bears. positive notes that I found for the Panthers are the added weapons for Bryce Young. They drafted Xavier Legette. And I said his name better than anything you'll ever understand coming out of his mouth. They also traded for Deontay Johnson and drafted a running back, Jonathan Brooks. So they are trying to build some options for Young. On a negative, the early returns on Bryce Young have not been so good. Out of 48 qualifying quarterbacks, he was 44th in accuracy, 44th in yards per attempt, and 41st in expected points per added per attempt, and 39th in success rate. So not a stellar start for the young QB. Next up, we have the New Orleans Saints. They have second-year head coach Dennis Allen. They've added a new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak from San Francisco. Saints have a win total, I think, over under 7.5. Last year, they had the easiest schedule in the NFL and still only managed to finish 9-8. On a positive note for the Saints, they've got a good core of receivers in Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Juwan Johnson, and also gadget player Taysom Hill. Negative note, the run efficiency for the Saints really stinks. Alvin Kamara is in a decline. His longest rush in 2023 was 17 yards. Since the year 2000, there's been 771 running backs qualifying with at least 150 rush attempts, and only one of them had a long rush of less than 17 yards. That's in stat from Warren Sharp's book. Pretty astounding to see how bad Kamara was. Lastly, in this division, we had the surprise Tampa Bay Bucks, who made the playoffs last year and won a game, I believe. They're coming in with a over-under of 8.5 under second-year head coach Todd Bowles. They also add a new offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen from Kent college ranks. That's an interesting move there. Positive note for the Buccaneers, they've got a good secondary with Antoine Winfield and Jordan Whitehead. Got this Todd Bowles effect going on with this defense. They were pretty steady. The positive that I see here is they signed Baker Mayfield in the offseason to a 3-year, $115 million contract for a veteran quarterback that is a very team-friendly deal. Negative, on the negative side, the wide receiver core of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin is only getting older. I'm not sure that they've not already peaked. And the tight ends on this team are weak, and the run game was weak too. Rashad White did not fare very well in any metrics. So there's my run down of the division. You guys have got any thoughts and predictions there?
Good, Nat.
Just think the NFC South is just going to be like there this year. I don't expect them to do much in the playoffs. We went over that Michael Penix deal during draft night, during our draft stuff over and over. And as an IU fan, I wish he'd have been somewhere else. I see Tampa Bay probably coming out of here, though. Atlanta probably gives them a dogfight. That's my thought.
Yeah, so I kind of look at it a different direction, honestly. The Falcons are going to be a reverse of what they were last year, where they had no offense, but their defense was trying to keep them in games. And they may be the exact opposite this year, where their offense is putting up points and their defense is just holding on, right? Losing Bud Dupree hurts. Calais Campbell, it's not just the physical and the playmaking, it's the energy and the leadership that he brings to a team that's hard to replace. So that should be interesting. I've got the Falcons coming out of this division just because if you look at them last year, if they would have had any QB play, they would have been it. So
yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. I've got the Falcons winning this division. The note, it's funny. I had a different prediction, before I got to working on my breakdown of the NFC North, and I started looking at the Vikings stats with Kirk Cousins. So I kind of pivoted a little bit. But my NFC South prediction is Kyle Pitts scores more than 10 touchdowns and goes over 1,000 yards this year.
Kirk Cousins does utilize his tight ends. Not a whole lot else to say there. I mean, the Panthers are what the Panthers are at this point in time.
They're trash.
O-line. Yeah, I mean, bad O-line, a rookie QB who's just, running for his life. Is Thielen still there? I mean, so you got, Thielen, Leggett, and Deontay. Okay, that's fine. But if you can't stay upright to throw the ball, it doesn't really matter. The Saints, I really thought would have been more of a contender last year with Derek Carr. I thought that was an upgrade over what they were doing. That they've got the talent there, but they, maybe another year in the system will do it. I don't know. Tampa, I don't know. I think Mayfield's year last year was a fluke. I think he was just trying to prove a point, and I think it's a fluke. I hope I'm wrong because you're always pulling for people, but anyway.
I mean, Mayfield's just a steady Eddie. He's not a guy that is like an all pro or anything like that.
He's a manager.
He's a gamer though. Like, look what he went out to LA and started on a week without any freaking practices. Then he goes to Tampa and, he just kind of keeps proving himself to be, he is NFL capable. He's not a top 10 guy, but he's not a bottom third quarterback as far as starters are concerned.
You know what his problem is that he got drafted number 1 and the expectations are too high. Because if he comes out in the 3rd or 4th round, everybody's talking about what a great story it is and look at how good he's doing. But the expectations were so high.
Then he had,
he also
he had the Cleveland years.
He went to Cleveland, so
right.
and even
Cleveland
over that, he made himself into a marketable guy. Look, he's got all those State Farm commercials and stuff like that.
100%. 100%. All right, that was my fault because that was more time than I wanted to spend on Baker Mayfield ever. Totally my fault. All right, I'll go ahead and keep it going, and we'll roll into the NFC East here. And I'm going to start off with the Dallas Cowboys. It looks like Vegas line of 10.5 for them. Here's my positive for them. They draft 2 O-linemen in the first 3 rounds. Great move. I mean, because you already got some really good pieces in place, with Dak and your tight ends, and you got CeeDee Lamb, and I think Jalen Tolbert's your number 2 there. So you've already got a good offense in place. You really just need to make sure that line stays healthy. They lose Dan Quinn, but they bring in Mike Zimmer as their defensive coordinator. A great move. Love that move. When he was in Minnesota, they had a pretty good defense. The negative here, though, is they're fairly quiet in free agency. They signed Zeke back to the team, which, it's outside of the storyline. I don't really think it has a huge impact on the team, although I will consider running back a weak spot for that team. My big negatives for them, too, though, is that they did not extend Parsons, they did not extend Lamb, and they did not extend Prescott. Those are 3 massive parts of your team. Go as far to say that is your team. And losing any one of them is going to be a huge hit to not only the success of your team, but also the marketability of your team. And I believe Prescott will be an unrestricted free agent next year, if I'm not mistaken. But you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. Moving right along to the Giants. As part of my research, I watched the first 4 episodes of Hard Knocks, which was pretty good, very entertaining as always. We'll get into that. They have a Vegas line of 6.5 wins. They draft Malik Neighbors. They add Jermaine Illuminor and John Runyon to their offensive line, which is good because they were also rough. They trade for rusher Brian Burns, Spider-Man as they call him. They signed QB Drew Lock as their backup to Daniel Jones or their break glass in case of emergency. And then they bring in a new defensive coordinator, Shane Bowen from Tennessee, after Wink was fired / resigned, whatever that weird situation was. Shane Bowen comes over from Tennessee Titans. kind of a nasty get after it type of coordinator. Tennessee always played tough defensively. So it should be pretty interesting to see what he does with that Giants defense. Obviously, their big losses. Darren Waller retires, so you lose your number one receiver from last year. Their best safety, Xavier McKinney, he walks, and then you lose Saquon. I understand he's a 27-year-old running back, but it's Saquon Barkley. He has literally put that team on his back the entire time he's been there in every single game that he played. So, and you lose him to a division rival, which we'll get into next. Which brings us into the Eagles with a line at 10.5 wins. That one's going to be interesting to me. They did a great job this year. They extended A.J. Brown. They extended Devontae Smith. They extended Landon Dickerson and Jordan Mailata to keep that line going. And then, as we just mentioned, they signed Saquon to give them a true, I'll call it 3-down back. And then on the coaching side of it, too, they bring in Kellen Moore as their offense coordinator and Vic Fangio as their defensive coordinator, which is big because that's probably where they were struggling last year. They just didn't have it. I'll be curious to see what Kellen Moore does with Jalen Hurts, because everybody does kind of look at him as more of the rushing QB, even though he only rushes from the one. But, we'll see what happens. My two negatives for this team, their backup QB situation is bad, really bad. So if something happens to Jalen Hurts, you're done. Their backup plan is Kenny Pickett. That's not going to be great. And the bigger one for me is Jason Kelce retires. And that's a massive loss that I think kind of people are downplaying. Again, kind of the heart and soul of that line and to an extent that team. And I think the leadership and everything that he brought to it, that missing could really have an effect on the success rate of that team. Moving into Washington, this one, it's really hard to go positive or negative because so much change has happened. Bringing Dan Quinn as your head coach. You've got Cliff Kingsbury as your OC. You got a new defense coordinator, obviously. They added center Tyler Biadasz and guard Nick Allegretti, which is good. You need to have a line because you draft Jaden Daniels, so you need to protect him. You bring in Austin Eckler, I guess, compete, help. That running back room is interesting. Bring in Mariota as a backup QB. I like that because it's a good veteran leadership and guide for Jaden Daniels. You also add Bobby Wagner on defense. Those are good additions. The negative side, even with the additions, your O-line is still weak. And then also the loss of Kendall Fuller in the secondary is going to hurt an already struggling defense. 6.5 wins might be rough for them, but it's all going to come down to how electric Jaden Daniels can be for that team. Because they've got some weapons. It's just going to be a matter of what they do with it. That's that, fellas. Any thoughts on the East?
Well,
I think it's a 2-team race.
Yeah, I think that absolutely. There's 2 good teams and there's 2 bad teams.
Yeah.
So it really will help the 2 good teams to kind of pump their records up a little bit. I think that one of the big things for you mentioned Jason Kelce gone from the Eagles. Dallas lost Tyron Smith, and their ranking of their offensive line, which has been perennially like top 5 year over year, has dropped all the way down to what looks like a bottom 5 unit. And so I think that's going to make things a little bit more difficult for Dallas.
Yeah.
All the different contract situations they have going on, distractions and things like that. I just see them falling back a little bit overall. And Philadelphia really is interesting with Kellen Moore at the OC position. So maybe that balances out the loss of Kelce a little bit because Kellen Moore has such a good mind on offense and can lead and kind of teach. Because, without Kelce, I don't think they've got that Philly tush push going all year. I don't think it works
as well, right?
As well. But Kellen Moore has shown to be very wide receiver friendly in offenses. So you got Devonta Smith there and A.J. Brown that really could benefit that. You see how well Keenan Allen and CeeDee Lamb did under him. I predict that Philadelphia wins this division kind of going away this year.
Well, and you guys have been able to watch a lot more than I have over the last few years, but one of those things for what little I've been able to watch is just how much Philly's culture over the last 3 years and just there's sustained success, whereas like Dallas will figure out a way to take victory out of the jaw or defeat out of the jaws of victory come postseason. And so it's like we call it a 2-team race just for the division, but Philly probably goes longer in the playoffs. It's just something with Dallas's culture that just in spite of themselves. That's my 35,000 foot take on it.
All right. My hot take prediction here is that Drew Lock will start for the Giants at some point in time this season. Whether that be week 1 to kind of protect Jones, or whether that be towards the end of the season or even halfway through the season, and they go, you know what, we got to move on.
Didn't they just re-sign him?
So yeah, listen, they signed Daniel Jones. They're paying him money. They looked into trading with the Patriots to go up and get Drake May.
Yeah.
They had deals in place. Now, if you guys have not watched Hard Knocks, that was very interesting because they also had deals in place with Chicago. They had deals in place with the Chargers. It was very interesting.
I saw the clip for the Chicago deal.
But it was real simple. They said, look, if we got a chance to improve, we're going to try to improve. Right? They were happy to get Neighbors. That was their receiver from the get-go. You know, they brought in Harrison, Adunze, and Neighbors. They had them all in the building. They talked to them all at the same time. And then when they asked the receivers coach who would take, he said Neighbors over the other two, which is, you know, everybody's got their own take. It's interesting. So they got their guy, but they were looking at, I think they said the 6 overall, a 1 next year, and then like a 3rd from this year. And if that would do it, they would have done it. But anything else. But New England was like, listen, we need a QB. We're not moving out of it. So I will not be really surprised to see if when Daniel Jones struggles that Drew Lock will get a start at some point in time this season.
That's a good. I find that as a good take. I mean, you got Dayball now going into year 3, and he'll be looking to protect his job if he needs to pull the trigger on a quarterback. That'll
Joe Shane
happen.
too, because he hasn't. Jones wasn't his guy, right? So
yeah.
Speaking of Dable and Hard Knocks, really quick, you guys need to watch it because they show him at the combine, and while they're watching the 40s, and Dable did some shit that would have reminded me of you, Justin, where he was like, I could run like a 7-second 40. And all the scouts and everybody were like, the hell you can. And he goes, listen, if you put a plate of wings at the end of that 40, I guarantee you I'm running a 7.
There it is.
And then Xavier Worthy runs his first 40. And Dable goes, hey, you think if I started at the 20 and Worthy started, at the 40, you think he would pass me? And they're like, oh, hell yeah. Like, easy. And he's like, fuck you, man. He goes, where do you think I'd have to start? And then his buddy goes, at the 35, like 5 yards out. Like, it just reminded me of a type of conversation you and me would 100% have. So it's pure gold. If you haven't seen it, go watch Hard Knocks, Giants offseason. It's been really entertaining so far. But all right, I'll leave that alone.
I feel those digs right there. I feel them. Don't worry.
Listen, man, the last time I tried to run a 40 was drunk in a bar parking lot, and I'm pretty sure I tore a piece of my quad, so I won't be running any of those anytime soon.
Which one was that?
Difference between you and I'm smart enough not to try to run a 40 at this point.
Yeah, I still
which bar was that?
Frank.
Of course.
So, all right, let's go ahead and move on to the NFC West. What you got for us, Nat?
NFC West, home of 4 of the last 6 NFC champions and the last NFC team to actually win the Super Bowl. Their intra-conference is the NFC North. Their inter-conference is the AFC East. Their 17th game is the AFC West. First team, Arizona. Last year, they were 4-13, 0 division wins. Other playoffs. Big notes, Murray has had 1 winning season in the last 5 years, and they're underdogs this year in 11 of 17 matches. They had some good gains. They took the Bears' defensive line, Justin Jones, and a couple others. They had 7 picks this year in the draft in the first 3 rounds alone. Their big positive is they've got a strong wide receiver core, not only with Marvin Harrison Jr., but reports coming out of training camp are saying Michael Wilson, the second-year receiver out of Stanford, is showing a strong camp and could show promise in second year, which they're going to need. Because if teams just sit there and double team Marvin Harrison Jr. and Wilson doesn't step up, that team's going to not get any more than 4 wins like last year. Other good steps, they've improved their O-line. They're putting their second-year man, Paris Johnson, in at left tackle, replacing DJ Humphries. And they've done placements to their D-line. Their big problem is overall their defense is still unproven and overhauled, and their cornerback replacements are acting more like Band-Aids than actual replacements, which leads me to give a prediction that they're 6-11 would be accurate, but probably generous. But if Max Wilson takes that leap, they might actually get up to 7. They've got a harsh schedule, though, for someone with a 4-win team. Next up, the Los Angeles Rams of Inglewood. They were 10-7 last year, 5-1 in the division. Second place, got to the wild card, lost in the reunion game to the Lions in the wild card. New defensive coordinator, their last one, Raheem Morris, left to take the Atlanta Falcons head coaching job. So he's been replaced with Chris Shula. Pretty active in the free agent market. 4 picks in the first 3 rounds. Big plus is they got a stable O-line, youthful skill positions, including 2 incredible finds out of in the last couple of years in the 5th round with Puka Nacua and wide receiver and Kyron Williams. The big issue is the big 800-pound gorilla in the room is the loss of Aaron Darnold. They used their first 2 picks in the draft were used to try to address that issue, plus a couple free agent signings. They drafted Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, both out of Florida State, out of that undefeated team that should have been a national championship picker. Their other negatives, in addition to losing Aaron Donald, is they've already had a couple sub injuries in training camp. One was to a backup cornerback in Darian Kendrick, who's going to be out for the season. And the success of going anywhere deep in the playoffs is going to be dependent on whether or not Stafford and Cooper Kupp can stay healthy. I'm predicting 10-7, growing pains, second half, borderline playoffs. Third team in there would be San Francisco 49ers of Santa Clara. 12-5 last year, 5-1 in division. First place, NFC champions. Lost in the Super Bowl in overtime in that epic match against Kansas City. As we all know, 49ers replaced their defensive coordinator 3 days after the Super Bowl. Replaced Steve Wilkes with Nick Sorensen. They signed some good talents. They got Leonard Floyd replacing Chase Young. They picked up Malik Collins, who had 5 sacks last year in defensive end. They've lost some. They lost a little bit too, but they gained more than they lost in their defensive makeup. Their biggest overall pluses is that they kept the majority of that core together. And whatever they had to replace, they replaced with some strength. Their biggest negative this year is going to be contract distractions. They haven't re-signed Trent Williams, and it looks like it's going to happen, but it hasn't happened. Bigger than that is the fact that Brandon Ayuk is not re-signed yet, and he's raising a fit. And they're entering the window for Brock Purdy to be re-signed probably next season because he's making barely $1 million next year. So that $30 million cap they're sitting on is going to get eaten up in a hurry. Otherwise, I got them less than 12-5. I have them thinking more like 10-7, maybe 11-6, because teams who have a tendency to lose the Super Bowl have a tendency to have that fog the next year. But there's so much energy surrounding that team, I don't think they fall off too bad. Brings me up to the Seattle Seahawks of Seattle. They had a 9-8 record last year, 2-4 in division. Of course, they missed the playoffs. Particular note, they're one of those teams in the market talking to Connor Williams. They had massive coaching overhauls. As we know, Pete Carroll left, replaced with Ravens defensive coordinator Mike McDonald. They also replaced their defense coordinator, offensive coordinator, special teams player, towel boy, valet. They pretty much replaced everyone. Few signings, few replacements, but their biggest strength next year going into that new offense is going to be a strong wide receiver core with Metcalf, Lockett, and Smith. Well, let me try to get this right. Njigba. Smith Njigba, if I think I got that last name right. I think I got it right. But
if not, you pulled away from the mic so nobody's going to hear it. You're good.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right. All right. Last name Smith Njigba. Let's try that again.
Oh, that was
with
much more confident.
Second year with Geno Smith, chemistry with that core. That's going to be their strength. And Mike McDonald bringing a variation of the 3-4 defense that Seattle had switched to a 3-4 last year. McDonald's bringing another 3-4. So it'd be interesting to see what they do. The biggest thing about them is so many coaching overhauls. They're just a damn mystery. It's hard to even take any stats that came out of last year and try to translate them into this year because everything's going through a different filter. I'm guessing 7-10, but we'll see. My biggest prediction overall for the division is that the Rams will be better without Aaron Donald. I'm not saying they're not going to miss him. He's not going to be important, but they put so much changes into him. They put so much effort into him that it's one of those things, one of those rare things in life where something gets better when you lose something that important because you put so much effort in to try to replace it. And they've put in so many resources into trying to replace him that the team might actually do better. Go ahead, rip it apart. Let's do this.
I'm gonna keep it brief. You said Cardinals at 4 wins, right? That's your
last year, and I think I have them closer to 6 this year. But if they didn't get over 4, I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, that's what it was. If you didn't get over 4, I think they're going to surprise you. I think the Cardinals may show up in that 7 to 8 range. Personally, the Seahawks for me are going to be your big fall off. Just new head coach, and your offense coordinator's coming from college, correct? And Ryan Grubb. So we'll see how that translation works over. It could go the other way, right? It could be light that spark, but I think Seattle is actually going to be finishing towards the bottom of this division, if not at the bottom, and be looking to replace Geno.
Yeah. Like I said, that's why I kind of left it a mystery. Originally, I had him at a big fall off, and then all the momentum coming with McDonald, and the fact that they had some pieces, they still had some good pieces, so it wasn't a complete teardown. So the question is how fast they can implement their system in the training camp and be ready to go week 1, and I don't know the answer to it.
I expect that defense to be nasty, but I expect them to fall off.
Yeah. As to Arizona, I actually went back and forth. You get in that thing when you start researching a team and you start liking them, the more you find into them. Like, you start, like, not real fan, but you're kind of like, oh, this could happen, and this could happen, and this could happen. Like, if Paris Johnson does his thing, and Mike Wilson does his thing, and these picks do their thing, and they're actually improved. I actually had them up to like 8 and 9, and then I was going.
Then you started counting all the ifs and realized that you had to take out 5 wins for all the ifs.
This has to go well, and this has to go well, and this has to go well. So I tapered it back down.
I mean, I kind of think that Arizona does get up in that middling ground, which is a big improvement because Kyler is a year further removed from that ACL injury. Trey McBride had a huge breakout last year, especially the second half of last year, to the point where a lot of analysts are ranking him as a top 3 tight end this year. And then you go ahead and add Marvin Harrison Jr., who is, by all accounts, a professional wide receiver at this point already. So there's a lot to like about what's going on in Arizona. The thing that I kind of stumbled for me was your it sounded like you picked the Rams to be ahead of the Niners this year, and
I don't back and forth.
I don't see that. Aaron Donald is a huge loss for that squad, and it's just they haven't really done a whole lot to improve that team. Whereas I understand there's a couple of contract situations with the Niners. It's not at the level of the Cowboys at this point, and they're going to work things out. They'll get Trent Williams signed. Ayuk may just have to, suck it up and play this year out and just go off on his own to get the big contract next year. But that just gives him all the more incentive to play. They've got the advantage at so many positions that
I don't disagree.
That San Francisco, they've been knocking on that door, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them win the Super Bowl. I'm not making that prediction, but my prediction for this division is that Cooper Kupp outperforms Puka Nacua this year.
Is he going to stay healthy enough to do it?
Well, clearly,
that's
if I'm
obviously
making
his prediction.
Prediction,
well, he could have been one of those. Oh, he's going to do it in 12 games or something like that.
No, I think there's just been too much put on, and Kupp had been coming off injury, so that's my prediction. But let's go ahead and move this along to, if you've been paying any attention here, obviously we're Bears cast, and the NFC North has great interest. So instead of one of us taking it, we've all decided to break down the division. So why don't we do it like this? We'll take each of us will give our positive and our negative. We'll go one team at a time, and we'll save the Bears. We'll save the Bears for last.
Let's start with the Vikings.
Sounds good.
Justin, it's been you went first with the division, so why don't you go ahead and we'll let you start off the Vikings here.
Absolutely. I'll start out by just This I'm going to throw this stat out here just because as I was doing my research on the Vikings, it made me rethink some of my Falcons takes. It kind of made me bring them back a little bit. But Kirk Cousins, the loss of Kirk Cousins might not be as bad as you think. He was 22nd in expected points added per attempt, 29th in success rate, and 22nd in yards per attempt before he got injured last year. But my positive note for the Minnesota Vikings is that they have the second best net rest edge, and I'll just leave it at that.
There's the Warren Sharp stat of the day.
Second best net rest edge in the scheduling this year.
Okay.
Don't everyone jump in at once.
I'm so used to JD directing traffic.
Sorry. I'm struggling today.
I know, buddy. I'm just glad you're still vertical right now.
I'm struggling with every bit of it. So the addition of Aaron Jones, big deal. Signing Jefferson to that contract, getting that out the way, big deal. They trade up twice into the first round, which that's a negative for me to an extent because of how much capital they gave up. But you do get, hopefully, your quarterback of the future in McCarthy, and you get a good edge rusher in Dallas Turner because you lose Danielle Hunter. Sam Darnold? Sorry, we're doing positives. I'll stick with just the positives. That's where I'm at. All right. Aaron Jones, Justin Jefferson, and you've added two potentially really good rookies.
Yeah. Mine is the fact that even though they went through 4 quarterbacks last year, they still had a receiving core with Jefferson getting over 1,100 yards in 10 games. Their tight end Hawkinson is 95 catches for 960 yards, and Addison had another 911. So, I mean, they could potentially have 3 1,000-yard receivers if they can stabilize that position. And I'm going to stop there because we're doing positives. Because there's a part B to that.
All right. Well, we'll move on to the negative, and I will just go with the Jordan Addison suspension that is hanging over the team. Whether it happens this year or not, he's already basically said he's just going to take his lumps because he screwed up. So,
yep, right, and that's a decent loss because they were counting on him to be the number 2.
Absolutely.
You lose KJ Osborne. Then after that, I think it's Brandon Powell's the next man up for them. So it's a decent loss. I mean, you're technically Hawkinson's probably your actual de facto number 2, but having a true number 2 receiver makes a difference. As I alluded to before, the QB situation, Justin, you said it may not be that big of a deal to lose Kirk Cousins. But hot damn if that's not a drop off. Kirk Cousins to Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy. And I mean, you don't really know what you're going to have with McCarthy as far as, a rookie coming into the NFL and who knows. But from what I hear, it's Sam Darnold's job right now.
It's just making 2 of us want to throw up tonight.
Now, again, another guy that just, because of where he got drafted and all the expectations and everything, just really bad break. But he's done nothing after that either.
Nope, he has not. And I think mine ties in with your guys. Right now, they're just that offense is an army in search of a general. They've got great weapons and a pretty decent line. Who the hell is going to throw them the damn ball? It's just they've got to stabilize that. They got to come to something.
And I'm going to add in here too that they gave up a lot of draft capital.
Yes, they did.
Get those 2 first-round picks. They moved up 1 spot to get McCarthy, and then they moved from 23 to 17, I believe, to get Dallas Turner. And I think they probably gave up 5-6 picks to do those 2 trades.
That film on Dallas Turner is crazy. The range he's got it sideline to sideline, but that was a lot to give up.
Well, and also you guys mentioned Hawkinson. He's coming off double tendon tear in the knee there with the ACL and MCL, and it was late in the season. It's not like it was early, so his availability is definitely in question for the start of the season, and his effectiveness as he comes back from that. Who knows when he'll be up to the A game? So overall, I think we could all agree that Minnesota is struggling coming into this season. Let's go ahead and
they get no sympathy.
Move it on over to the Detroit Lions. They got a win total over under of 10.5 this year. My positive for this team is they've just got one of the best offensive lines in the league, and that allows them to do so much with all the other weapons that they have. Having those trenches in order really makes a big difference for this squad. And my little side note at the top, and this could be debatable, but Dan Campbell, best coach in the division.
In the division? Okay.
Yeah.
I can give you that. Just the way that whole organization is run, honestly, with Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn and even their GM, like it's just they all have that same mentality, right?
Yeah.
Which is great. You mentioned their offensive line, and that's kind of where my positives were, is that they obviously they do extensions with Goff, they do extensions with St. Brown, they also extend Penei Sewell and Taylor Decker, right, to keep that offensive line there. And without that offensive line, you don't have the extent for Goff, because I don't think he has anywhere near the success that he has, right? As good as a job as Ben Johnson has done with that offense, keeping him upright is so key for him to be not even upright. I'll just say not pressured to have to put the team on his back, essentially. So really big. And as I mentioned, from the head coach, the offense coordinator, defense coordinator, they're still there. So you get that continuity. Really big for that team.
Mine was pretty akin to yours. I pointed out that most of that top 5 offense returned back to the field, and it looks like they patched some of the holes they had in the secondary. Not perfectly, but better what they had.
Well, we keep making you go last here for these positives, so we'll let you take the negative first. So you get first crack here, buddy.
Oh, first crack of the negatives? All right. My first crack is they have a weakness on that defense. It's that interior alignment. Is that interior pass defense. So we'll see if the patches they made will hold up to make them better than they were last year. And that's the only negative I had on them right now.
Okay. I've got a couple here. Justin, I don't want to accidentally take any of yours here, but
no, I was going to say their secondary is the big weakness on that squad. And they gave up a lot of points a lot of times last year. They were 30th in versus the pass overall and 31st in yards per attempt. And while they did draft Terrion Arnold at cornerback, that's about all they did there. So,
well, they also picked up that Enos Rickshaw Jr. out of Missouri in the second round at cornerback, and then they signed a third one. So to me,
that's
was
not
the
a football
patches.
School.
Wife gonna whoop your ass.
Yeah, no, that was a direct shot her way.
I shot over the bow at my wife. Well, I looked when I was going through it. The cornerbacks looked like they're in better place than they were last year, but it'll still be unproven until they prove themselves.
So here's my negatives for the team, and I kind of went for not just this year, but the Goff extension. While it was good because you lock your QB up, it's also expensive for what he is, especially when last year they drafted Hendon Hooker to be his backup, and obviously they knew he wasn't going to play last year because he was coming off an injury of his own, but he's back to healthy, and if he starts putting pressure on it, now you've got yourself in a situation, right? The other things that I have for them, not real huge in the grand scheme of things. You lose Josh Reynolds, who by all means was your de facto 3, your number 3 receiver, but he was a steady, dependable guy for them kind of down the stretch that somebody's going to have to step into that role. And then a couple days ago, sometime last week, their place kicker injured his hamstring and is done for the season. And when I say injured, I'm pretty sure he tore it off the bone, which is not ideal for a place kicker. So
no, I didn't see that.
Again, kickers are replaceable type of, but like
Dan Campbell doesn't like to use his kicker that much anyway. So
right. But still,
yeah.
Who's that?
So, all right.
Yeah.
Anything else on the Lions?
No,
Jets?
I'll give it up to Nat here. You can go first on your positives for the pukers.
Oh, I was gonna let if JD want to do it for his wife, but
The
I only had
Green
one
Bay
positive.
Packers.
My only positive that it's a second year with a very young offense, which could they're ranked a lot between 12 and 15. A lot of things. I think they might actually be a top 10 offense this year with the changes they made and the second year together. I was very topical this time. You guys got on my case for being too deep, so I was keeping it very light.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna tie in solid young group of receivers in tight ends. I mean, they've probably got 4 or 5 playable, startable receivers across the board. They've got 2 tight ends, and now one of them's coming off an injury. I can't remember off the top of my head, so we're gonna have to get that one. I mentioned earlier the Giants losing Xavier McKinney. Packers add him, right?
4 years, $68 million.
And they drafted a offensive lineman out of Arizona to replace John Runyon. So
Jordan Morgan
doing it.
Yep. Well, my positives that I put down begrudgingly: player development. Packers as an organization continue to outpace the league when it comes to developing, especially at the quarterback and wide receiver positions. Those receivers coming into last year, basically unknowns, and they all performed very admirably. The other little note that I did put in here is that the damn league, the NFL scheduling, gave them the 5th best net rest edge over. I love that stat. What it does is it just shows you there's how many opportunities they have with an advantage over the team coming into the week. It's such a rough sport, so one extra day of advantage over your opponent is huge.
Especially when the biggest ability in the NFL is availability. So
absolutely,
100%. All right, let's dip into that negative.
Okay, let me jump off here. Nat mentioned their youth. This team was the youngest team in the NFL last year. They got even younger. They didn't add a whole lot through free agency, and they had a couple of guys like Bakhtiari retire, or I don't know. He's not officially retired, but he's not signed anywhere yet. And they had 11 draft picks. And I'll leave it at that and continue to nuke them after you guys go too. So,
just as I mentioned, the expensive investment in golf for the Lions, really, really expensive investment in Jordan Love after a very short amount of time, like 1 full season. And you're just going to say, okay, and a 9-8 record at that. Like, yeah, he played really well towards the end of the season and through the playoffs. But damn, that's an expensive one.
What year?
You lose Aaron Jones, you lose John Runyon. I'm gonna say you lose David Bakhtiari. You mentioned he made a retire. He only played I think like 1 game last year, but still, like I've said it a couple times tonight. Losing leadership, especially on a line, is a big deal. A big deal, and so we'll see what happens when. I mean, you've lost 2 of your guys there on that line. And he's a jump thrower anyway. He likes to jump off his back foot and throw a lot, and he may be doing that a whole lot more now. And the Josh Jacobs signings, that was the other one. It made no sense to me.
I don't know. You replaced one guy, at running back who was pretty damn good. I know he was a bear killer for sure, Aaron Jones, but I don't really understand. It's not like you paid less to get Jacobs, so.
Yep.
I was going to say, Jordan Love is in his 5th year. I'm not sure how that would affect the contract negotiation, but just one of those pay him or lose him kind of situations then if he's in his 5th year.
What's happened? You don't play him until 4th year.
If I remember right, Josh Jacobs is like a year younger than Aaron Jones and often a lot healthier. Be more than that,
right?
Oh, we looked it up back in like April. It was like a year difference between the two.
I keep thinking Aaron Jones is much older. I don't know why.
I think you thought he was the same age as his jersey number.
Yeah, probably. Excuse me.
Yeah, Jordan Love throws. He loves to throw off his back foot, and he. I mean, while the results were there in the second, there a lot of tips and slips that went his way that things could have really ended up a lot worse for him. He reminds me of Brett Favre when he was throwing all those interceptions, which I know Brett Favre was a bear killer, but overall he didn't light up the league as much as Rodgers. So
different era, but yeah, point taken.
Yep. All right. Hey guys, I'm gonna go first on this one.
All right. Get it.
I'll try to leave something for you. Actually, you know what? I won't even go into player additions. I'll keep this one simple. I'll leave all the player additions to you because I know this is going to be a big positive for you guys. My positive is having a continuity at head coach. I know everybody was kind of dicey on it, but you look at the most successful QBs, having continuity is extremely important. So I like keeping Flus. Also, positive for the Bears is that Shane Waldron is now your offensive coordinator, and we finally have an offensive coordinator. Like I don't know when the last time we honestly had one, a good one anyway. So Waldron has a proven track record of being successful with QBs and even young QBs. I like it. That's the big one for me is regardless of how the QB room ended up shaking down from back in April or whatever, we actually had an offensive coordinator. And Nat, we are on the Bears, so if you wanna join us, go ahead.
Then I was going. My biggest plus was that best in class wide receiver core. I know I took the easy one, and I think we've covered it over and over again. But between Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, and having Roma Dunze, who sounds like he's in a little bit of a camp competition right now for that third spot, that's just an amazing strength to bring Caleb Williams into. I don't think he is either, but I was watching that podcast and like, a little bit of a competition going on. I'm like, I didn't think it was going to last.
We need to find you some better podcasts. I don't know.
I know.
You need to stop worrying so much about training camp. Good Lord.
Practice.
Oh, here it comes. We talking about practice. I see how it is.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, there's the obvious. We had the first overall draft
I took the
pick.
obvious one.
And he's proving thus far to do the right things, say the right things, improving on a daily basis, making the throws. It's exciting to have what I hope to be a long-time best ever quarterback on the team that I root for. But that for sure, I think they did improve their O-line. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Nate Davis if they make a move there. But the other note, besides all that, because everybody wants to talk about the offense, but that's secondary.
There it is.
Those dudes are studs. Jalen Johnson is a stud lockdown corner, and he makes the rest of the team better. If that defensive line beyond Sweat takes the next step, that defense is going to be one to be reckoned with. So, Nat, why don't you shoot some negatives?
All right, my biggest negative is going to be the D-line, middle. They're young. They're going to be able to take that next step like you talked about, or if they're going to continue to be the weakness in the defense. Another one would have been, how fast is Caleb Williams actually going to catch on? It's a whole lot of pressure we're putting on a rookie quarterback. And the third one we already brought up, paging Nate Davis. As you pointed out in chat the other day, it sounds like Eberflus is having the same problems Vrabel had in Tennessee with him. And last one is, if it's really a new haircut, is it really a new Eberflus? Are we actually going to have a much better Eberflus in 24 than we had in 23?
Why don't you just take them all?
Man, if I'm too light, I'm too heavy. I can't hit the middle of the sandwich tonight.
One, and then fill in. That's all right.
All right.
Yeah. I'll hop in. The DeAndre Swift deal. I didn't get it. 14 million guaranteed. He struggled for at least half of the season last year around one of the best offensive lines in football. So how's he going to do behind not one of the best offensive lines in football with a young QB? We'll see what happens, but it didn't make a lot of sense to me to pay him that kind of money. I don't have a problem with him. I just think the money didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I could see that a little bit. I do think that you're talking about a completely different type of offense that we're going to be playing here versus, their lead runner and first option was always their quarterback there in Philadelphia.
Well, from within the 5, yeah.
Or anytime it was short yardage or, they weren't really utilizing the running backs that much to control the game. But it was a question mark. There were probably 4 other running backs that I would have probably chosen to go after before DeAndre Swift. And he was signed pretty early in that free agency process there. So
it did sound from the Hard Knocks that Chicago was driving up the price on Barkley early on.
Yeah.
Which I'm glad we didn't end up, paying a ton for him either, as much as I love Barkley, but they at least tried theoretically.
Yeah. So my negatives were definitely also the defensive line outside of Sweat is unproven. And then my added little tag was the head coaches too. As much as JD, I agree that continuity is good. I'm not sure that continuity for continuity's sake is good. And hopefully he's turned a corner, and hopefully this new offensive coordinator is good enough to lead this squad so that Flus can focus on the defense, and hopefully there's no off the field things that Eberflus has to address in the media, because that is certainly his weak point. To me, it was a problem in leadership for a young team last year. So
I'm just going to say, remember how quickly the winds can turn here in the NFL, because if you remember Trubisky's first year with Nagy, I seem to recall a large contingent of Bears fans talking about how good Trubisky was, and Nagy got coach of the year, if I'm not mistaken, or he was at least a candidate for it. And then fast forward a year later, 2 years later, people could not wait to run him out of town. So while I know I don't know, Nat, we weren't really talking about at the time. I know Justin and I talked a lot about, we wanted an offensive head coach to be there. So Flus was already kind of under the gun, if you will. He was on the hot seat. I think he's doing what he can with what he's got. That team was a hot mess.
I just wanted a goddamn kicker.
Not much of a hot take for the first overall draft pick, but my real prediction for this division is that there are 3 teams with 10 wins or more.
Oh, interesting.
And one of them is not the Vikings.
Yeah. I'm not going to go into the 10 wins. I think the Bears and the Packers and I realize this is going to sound like a huge thing here, but I think they're going to be in a close contest for second place in that division. I don't think it's going to be like Detroit on top, and then Packers like real close behind them and then a significant drop. I think the Packers are going to struggle enough and the Bears are going to do just enough. We talked, you guys had them at 11 and 6, right? Or 12 and 5. Did you guys have 12 and 5? And I was at 9 and 8. That
was early. That was right after, right off of schedule release. I don't think
I had him at 9 and 8. I think is where I was at, and I think I'm going to stick right around that spot. And I think it may come down to a late game in the season between the Bears and the Packers. Matt, you got one? You got a prediction for us on the NFC North?
I think Caleb's going to struggle more than we realize. I think the DL is going to be a little better than we anticipated, and I don't think they're going to go 12 and 5. I'd like to finally recant my prediction.
Wow!
Finally,
the season didn't even start. You're already backing out of it.
I didn't want 12 and 5 when we were doing it.
I think that, as we've seen from episode to episode, Nat's not afraid to put on the back pedal. So
fair. That's fair.
That's okay. We'll get in.
Will come off that bike.
We'll get into like season predictions for records and who's going to make the playoffs before the season starts and all that. So we'll all be able to document where our final stance is. All of our predictions thus far were fairly early in the process, so we can all adjust and have a final stance before the season. And I'll be the optimist. I'm used to that in my life, being the optimist. So
I'm not moving off my 9-8. But either of you have any final thoughts on any of these divisions that we talked about? So conference, NFC here.
I keep thinking about the Rams. They've signed a pretty decent tight end to take the fact that Tyler Higbee's going to be out. But if they actually end up having both of them in the lineup, it's just I kind of caught myself imagining the different offensive possibilities they could have in formations coming out late in the season. I don't even like the Rams. I just researching them and think they might actually overthrow San Francisco this year.
I don't know. That's a bolder prediction than I don't know that your 12-5 was pretty damn bold. I don't know. Between that and your Pittsburgh winning the division thing, you're really
I'll take that.
lofting some out there. Justin, anything else from you before we get out of here?
no, I think
Another bad call for a reason.
It's just been good to start digging into these teams and looking at the divisions and kind of have an idea of what we think we know going into the season, and that's what the fun of it is to find out, week 4 that we were totally off base. But it'll be fun, and we've got, like I said, we're now at T-minus 69 hours and some
noise
until we got some broadcast football being played, and we're under 6 weeks until Scott Hansen gives us the Octobox. Looking forward to it, boys.
Well, everybody that stuck around this long, we truly appreciate you. Again, don't forget to hit that like, follow, subscribe, whatever it is for whichever platform you're on. Share with your friends, family, whatever. Please, really anything will help us out, and we truly appreciate it. And until next time, try to avoid making another bad call.